Good evening. You're watching Social Impact on IDNR TV, and I'm your host, Anita Verma. This is our second installment entitled Keeping You Safe Against Consumer Fraud. Now we're talking about things that you need to consider when you are shopping online or shopping in general in the stores that could make you susceptible to consumer fraud. Now, this is part two, like I mentioned, and our guest today is Kevin Bousquet, who is our one of our fellow hosts at IDNR TV. Kevin Bousquet is CEO of Corpa Investigation Services, and you are a certified fraud examiner. Okay, great. So just to recap, just for those who didn't catch the first show, what are the types of fraud that we need to protect ourselves against when we are shopping?
Well, I guess is the internet fraud that we talked about before, okay? Being wary of spoofing, okay? Getting emails that look like they're coming from a bank, look like they're coming from eBay, look like they're coming from PayPal, but they're not. And you need to remember not to click through these emails. Always go to the originating website of any financial email that you get looks like it's coming from a bank. Okay. Second thing is, no matter how hard it is, try to not give out your date of birth and social insurance number. Just in your head, date of birth, social insurance number, and then think of cutting your fingerprints off, because that's what it's like. You're giving away the two most main people. Like when I'm investigating someone, I always say, what do I want? You know, what do you need to investigate this? First thing, date of birth, social insurance number. So you got to try not to give it out on the internet, not to give it out on the phone, and just make a habit of not putting that information out there for anybody. All right, so that's the main thing.
And when shopping online, it's best to shop at sites who go through a merchant or are secure sites.
An authorized merchant, which is hard to do sometimes. You know, when you go back there, you click on, you want to make sure that there's an independent company that is taking your credit card number from you, an actual authorized merchant. And the classic example would be iBill, which is one of the ones. Now, there are some companies that, you know, will take your email, they could correct and take your credit card number. They're private companies. They're not going to rip you off, but you just need to try and always, you know, if you're shopping overseas or something, you'd kind of like to want to have some kind of an authorized, reputable merchant being an independent company that's taking down your credit card information on behalf of the company that you're buying this stuff for, okay, that kind of thing. So you need to be really, really wary about that kind of stuff.
Okay, and mortgage fraud also ties into that as well. Same thing, social insurance number and your birth date, as well as credit information. Don't let that get out. You could have a second mortgage on your house and not even know it until 90 days past due. Then it's up to you to prove it.
That's correct. We've done a whole show in this studio on mortgage fraud, and this is a huge growing problem. And it's a whole other topic unto itself that's out of control. So,
Kevin's got a show on IDNR TV as well called
Undercover with Kevin Bousquet.
So watch it. You can find out more about private investigators and the exciting life of them. Now, one thing I just wanted to touch upon, Kevin, was in line with credit card fraud. We didn't talk too much about debit card fraud.
Okay.
Now, with credit cards and debit cards, yes, we know that devices can be implanted where you would normally stick in your credit card, or when you're giving it to merchants, they'll swipe it. Well, crooked merchants or people in on the sort of scam, they swipe it once or twice, correct? And that way it would decode information and
does it have to be twice? No, it can be once. It's just it's a ring that's going to go over the entrance to the card, and it's one time. All right?
Now how do people get PIN numbers?
For this exact same device. Okay, it's going to be the exact same device. If, in this particular example, this little ring that's going to go right over the card slot. Okay, it goes on top, and they just come back later. They remove that ring, and the ring has basically got all the coded information. It's got your debit number, and it's going to have your actual PIN number as well.
I had always thought that cameras played a role in this as well.
As far as what, security?
As far as people getting PIN numbers.
It can. I mean, this is not something I come into contact with what I do a lot, but I mean, I'm sure there are situations where, you know, people are trying to get your PIN numbers by watching. There's a lot of situations I've been involved in where I've investigated where, you know, they've had these devices set up where they've recorded your PIN numbers, and the actual merchants, like the gas station person that was taking your credit card number, was, you know, monitoring your PIN numbers, that kind of stuff. I've seen that situation, but it's not an area where I'm actually kind of involved in. I'm kind of more involved when the fraud's taking place, and now we're, you know, reacting to the fraud.
Okay, because I remember seeing signs of people saying protect your PIN, cover your PIN when you're punching it in. And, you know, when you're watching security surveillance cameras on the news, they always have, you know, cameras going down and showing how people would have maybe gotten a PIN number. Sure. Okay, so now here's a question for you. How do you know if this was to happen to you? Do you find out when you get your bill in the mail, or would you find, you know, something's funny with your credit card, or your card's not swiping? Is that an indication?
Well, the first thing that might happen to you that you've been a victim of fraud, okay, is you might get a collection call, all right? And
okay, so before you get into this, now this shows me that it's going to take quite a while for you to find out. The first indicator happens much later. So is there no indication on the card itself?
That you've been a victim of fraud? I would say no. I don't think there's going to be anything out there that's going to let you know that your card's been, illegally swiped, or someone's managed to harvest your card number and your PIN number.
Okay.
I think you're going to notice it either when you notice there's money missing from your bank card in the case of a debit situation, or if it's a gas card, or if it's a Visa card or something like that, and you notice some kind of a form of a transaction on your credit card that you didn't make. That kind of thing. There are situations where people have been victims of fraud, and all of a sudden they're not even getting their statement anymore because the fraudster has managed to change the address, put it to a post office box or a fictitious address, which has allowed them close to 3 months to do illegal charges onto the card because the address has been changed in the process.
So they're actually going in and changing and manipulating your account so that you can't catch on.
So you're not getting the statement, all right?
Okay,
So you're not getting this. So this is another problem. So in a situation like that, chances are, either your credit card is maxed out, you can't use it anymore, or you might ultimately get a collection call around the 90th day, the third month of, which is when most debts go into a collection phase or into the phone call stage, that kind of stuff. So. Okay.
So before we get to that, everybody, look at your statements. I think that a lot of people don't look at their statements. They just have maybe pre-authorized payments, or they just pay automatically an amount from their bank accounts or send checks. They don't even look at their statements anymore. Just the dollar figure at the bottom.
Sure.
Look at your statements. Check out your transactions. Make sure they match up. Keep your receipts. Don't let anybody see your receipts is another thing that we need to also keep in mind.
Sure.
What kind of information can people get off receipts?
Are you talking about debit card receipts and stuff like
Anything.
that? I don't see a lot of that happening. I don't see a lot of situations where people have managed to manipulate or obtain a number, or alternatively obtain your personal from receipts, from credit card receipts. I've heard of situations where people have committed fraud, have gone through your garbage or in a business garbage and have managed to get credit card information through garbage and stuff like that. So I think it might be good when it comes to, if we're talking about receipts that you've bought something as opposed to your credit card receipts, and there's that folio or there's that number, you shred your garbage. Shred all your financial information in your garbage.
Well, you had also mentioned that when you're calling a bank or big companies, they may ask you to verify transactional information. I guess that would be an indication right there. Keeping a receipt is a transaction.
Sure.
It's a receipt of transaction,
Sure.
so that would be another indicator. So look, I just taught you something, Kevin.
I'm making notes.
Good to know. Okay, now, what do you do when this happens? Do you just talk to your bank? And what is the likelihood of you recovering these funds? Is it up to you?
Okay, I think if you've been a victim of some form of financial fraud, okay, whether it be credit card fraud, whether it be debit card fraud, I would say the first place that you should really be looking at to see is your credit bureau. So what you might want to do is go and look at your own credit bureau. Now, you can either hire someone to do your credit bureau for you, or you can go to, I think it's Equifax.ca or Equifax.com, and you can get your credit card online. They're going to basically try and confirm it's you getting the credit card through using your credit card information, stuff like that. Or you can go to the Equifax office, okay, and order your credit bureau. And by looking at your credit bureau, your actual credit bureau, the computerized document, you're going to see all of your credit cards that you have, everything that's a credit. Okay, you're going to see your loans, you're going to see the balances of your credit cards, and you're going to see the rating, okay, which is like the R rating, R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R1 being perfect. As you go down the scale, 30, 60, 90, when you get down to an R9, so for example, if you look and you see your credit card has a big, huge balance on it, and then it's R9. R9 would be the worst rating, bad debt, skipped, placed for collection. Okay. All right. So you need to do what I would call, some form of damage assessment. You need to see what the damage is before you can correct the damage, and the best way to do that is to see that if anyone's been looking into your credit bureau. That's the other thing that you can do when you look at your credit bureau. You can see who's been making inquiries into you. So if you, for example, are looking at your credit bureau, you can see every single person that queried you. If you see XYZ Citibank, for example, and you didn't apply for a Citibank credit card, all right, then you know that there might be something up here, that someone might have completed an application with Citibank, for example, and has tried to compromise your information. So you need to basically first do some damage assessment. Take a look and see what the damage is before you can clean it up.
Okay.
All right?
And now, when you're cleaning it up, who do you call? Do you call the police? You had mentioned that the police may not be able to do anything in this matter because they're so backlogged.
Okay.
So do you wait it out?
Calling the police is, you're going to report it. They'll come out. They'll fill out an occurrence. In some particular cities, they won't even come out. In some particular cities, they're just going to complete an occurrence over the telephone. An occurrence is not the same as an arrest report. An occurrence is exactly what it is. It's an involvement with police, okay, where you've been involvement with police, or you've been a victim or a reportee of a crime, all right? So, depending on where you launch this, depending on where you need to know that on average, the average fraud unit for most police forces, they're backlogged a year with respect to fraud. I said this in the last show, and it's not their fault. It has nothing to do with the police not doing their job or anything. It's just a matter of just being so much fraud out there that they're backlogged. So while they may complete an occurrence right away, it doesn't exactly mean that a fraud investigation is going to happen right away. It may, or it may not. And you've got to remember that calling the police is not going to fix your credit problem, okay? And calling the police is not going to recover your money that you've lost. It's calling the police is about punishment, okay? Find this guy, let's punish him, all right? And you've got bigger problems to deal with when you are a victim of this kind of a fraud. But you need to report it to the police. I'm skeptical as to just by way of their backlog, how far it's going to get. Look, there are a lot of people who have been victimized by fraud and are very unhappy with the fact that nothing has moved forward because of the backlog.
Okay. So then what are other options when you're in this scenario? What can you do?
I guess the main thing that we want to do is we want to, if we're a victim of fraud and we look at the credit bureau and there is stuff on our bureau that we did not apply for, you can write the credit bureau and have them put in what's called a narrative, okay? You can write the credit bureau and say, please be advised, I'm a victim of fraud, blah, blah, and the credit bureau will put a narrative in the bottom of your bureau, say, victim has been a reportee of fraud, report all matters by speaking with the consumer directly.
Okay.
So then if a bank is involved and they see this credit bureau, they'll think twice about going ahead with the application, whatever. So that's the one thing that the credit bureaus will do for you that they're very good is putting in what we would call a narrative, putting in that one-liner that's informing other people that are trying to apply for illegal credit in our name, letting them know. But the thing about it is you need to remember there's more than one credit bureau out there. There's Equifax Canada, TransUnion. Equifax has been around the most. TransUnion has really moved up. They're a really, really big company, so a lot of bank stuff are using TransUnion. And then when you get into the United States, there's what's called TRW, the TRW system. So the best case scenario is to look at all three bureaus if you can.
So it's up to the individual, the victim, then in this case,
to check your own credit bureau. To
speak to every credit bureau.
Yeah.
And to call every credit bureau.
First of all, to look at every single credit bureau with all three companies, okay? Second is to, if you see discrepancies there, to immediately inform the bureau that you've been a victim of fraud so they can get that narrative into your bureau without delay so there is no further fraud. No further people applying for credit in your name at all. Okay, that's it. Then you're faced with trying to clean this mess up, all right? And this becomes a letter writing campaign, and there have been articles and stories and people who have been in tears trying to clean up their credit rating, okay? And this involves, showing, let's say, for example, it's XYZ credit card company, you didn't apply for the credit card. You've got to show them a copy of the occurrence report that we discussed, that you have brought it to the attention of the police. Here's the occurrence number. It's being investigated. It's not me, blah, 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 blah. And try and get them to remove that statement. And the best way to describe cleaning up your credit bureau is nothing more than a writing campaign. You're going to be in credit bureau hell, if you'll excuse the term, for years, trying to clean it up. And the bureaus will clean it up. I mean, they will remove items that are wrong on your credit bureau, but you've got to satisfy them that it's not you. And that means getting all the backing documentation that you didn't do it, and it's not you. And they're going to want to see the occurrence. So that's why it is important to go to the police for that reason.
Okay, just to document it.
Yeah, but
have it on file that you did approach the police. They have it on file that this is what you are saying. It was not you. Call your credit bureaus, let them know it wasn't you. At least you have that documentation in place.
With no disrespect to any law enforcement agency, okay, you're going to be disappointed when it comes to reporting to the police. Look, every single client I've ever had in my entire life in this business has always been reported when it's been fraud. They've been victims of fraud, and they have never really been caught the guy or whatever. There's never going to be an order for restitution. Like if you think they're going to catch the guy and the judge is going to say, okay, you got to pay this money back to the consumer. First of all, it may happen. Second of all, it's probably you're never going to collect it and you're never going to see it.
Okay, so what if they don't catch the guy? Then what if it was your bank and you just saw $5,000 that just miraculously came out of your bank account? Now it's suddenly up to you to prove that you didn't spend this money.
Okay.
Now the bank, the police, whoever's involved doesn't find who's responsible. What happens to that $5,000? Is that, do you just take a hit? Or are you expected to?
It can go a bunch of different ways. The bank might write it off. Okay, the bank might be prepared to write it off.
Well, what is the likelihood of that happening?
Oh, pretty good. They will, if you can prove to them that you didn't. I mean, the banks are insured. Okay, so they will remove it and they will write it off if it's not your debt. But it's like anything, you're going to have to convince them that you didn't do it and it's not you. And sometimes they'll write it off. Just for example, like all of a sudden, you've been a victim of $10,000 Visa that wasn't yours, but the transactions when the credit card looks at them are all in another country. They're like in Nigeria or something. And I said, look, I've never been to Nigeria. And there's this guy, he's ordering all this stuff from Nigeria. The bank might look at the transactions and say, look, the guy's telling the truth. Let's write it off. Let's clean up his bureau, that kind of stuff. And the other thing that you should be aware of that the credit bureau companies may actually want a letter from the actual bank saying, yeah, we're convinced it's not them. We have written it off. And you might have to enclose that letter now to the credit bureau to get it removed. You need to know that you're going to be in trouble for a long time. And the other thing I also caution people, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, please, there are hundreds of companies out there that you can go on, you'll see them in the paper that say, we'll clean up your credit bureau for this amount, we'll remove this statement, it costs $200 to remove this bankruptcy. Statistically, a lot of these companies have been fraud companies. They have been companies that have taken people's money and purported to be able to remove things on credit bureaus, and it hasn't happened. And I was under the impression that these companies were starting to become illegal, or they were being charged in the Consumer Reporting Act or whatever. So be really wary of hiring a company that says that they can fix up your bureau, okay? Like for example, if you're bankrupt, there are companies out there that say, well, we can remove that bankruptcy statement from your credit bureau. It can't be done. If they are doing what they're probably...
Absolutely can't be done.
No, it's by law, it's going to be in your credit bureau for a number of years.
Okay, so then all these companies, are you saying all these companies that claim they can clear your credit record, then they're all fraudulent companies?
I'm not saying they're all fraudulent.
Okay.
Not at all. I'm sure there's somewhat, I will say that statistically, everything I've ever been involved in, every single client I've ever had in my life who has used these companies, it's been take your money and run situation.
I see.
All right? You just can't do it. They'll come back and say the credit bureaus aren't working with us, we can't get the data. There's 1,000 reasons that they can come back and say that they haven't been able to clean up the item on the bureau.
Okay.
So don't use them. Do it yourself. I mean, you're going to be more frustrated than anything trying to clean up trying to clean up this mess with the bureaus. It's not a fault of the bureaus. It's just they're doing their job. The banks are doing their job. They want to see evidence that you didn't incur the debt.
Yeah, of course it makes sense. But now this just brings me back to my next question, which is the banks are seeing a lot of this. The world is seeing a lot of fraud. Now, what is the approach to this with the victim? Is it innocent until proven guilty, or is it the opposite? Or is it guilty until proven innocent? Because that's what it would seem like to me, if the onus is on the victim to prove that they are not guilty in this case.
The onus is on the victim to prove that they didn't incur the debt with the bank. It doesn't mean they're guilty of anything. It just means they have to satisfy the banks that it's not their debt. It's not their credit card. They didn't fill out that credit application. It's not their signature on the credit card form, that kind of thing. So it's not about guilt and innocence, because we're not in anything criminal here. It's just a situation where they have to satisfy the banks. Unfortunately, this is all about victimization. Victimization is the worst thing that happens. There's no win-win situation. It's all about tears and frustration. That's what being a victim is all about. All right, it's up to you, unfortunately, to clean up the mess. Look at if our house is broken into and we lose all of our valuables and stuff. It's up to you to work with the police to try and all that kind of stuff. Same thing. Victimization, being a victim of something, is being a victim of something.
Well, one thing I can commend banks on is I can't remember which credit card company it was, but a couple of years back, I had received a phone call on my cell phone here asking me if I was in another country, in another continent, because my credit card number was being used there.
Well, okay. And that's great, but here was a situation that's happening to me. Like I put everything on American Express, okay? And I'll, for example, I go to the video store with my son, and I spend $25 on American Express, and then I'll go to the gas station and put 30, whatever. Now what's happening, I find, is that if I do these little charges on my credit card, I'm doing them all in a row. Around the fifth little charge, the retailer has to call in and say, okay, we just want to make sure it's him, and we speak to the person, whatever, and they're doing these security checks now because you're doing these tiny little transactions on the credit card. They think that, whatever. So it's really embarrassing. Like I was at Costco, and I had all these people behind me, and American Express is saying, well, we need authorization from the customer because I had done a bunch of little transactions on Amex, and I did so many things in one day that now they're calling to say, is this way the person, can you ask him for a driver's license? Nothing to do with my credit rating.
Sure.
Nothing really to do with my spending habits. I've always done. It's just something that they're doing now.
Being more
but I pray to God, this isn't going to happen when I'm at a restaurant and I'm entertaining clients, and the maitre d' comes back and says, well, here, Kevin, I'm sorry, but we have to do a check on you. We're going to need to see your driver's license. Now, when I called American Express, they said they don't do that with respect to meals and things like that. They only do it with respect to excessive spending patterns in the business day where it might be whatever. So while it is great security, and I don't know, it's just very frustrating and very embarrassing sometimes. Now, I had.
Well, let me ask you this.
Sure.
You had just mentioned it's frustrating, it's embarrassing. A lot of people don't want to go through these measures and all these precautions, even to be proactively safeguarding themselves and their credit. But now, do you think that maybe our approach to this may not be the best, where we put convenience at the expense, security at the expense of convenience? Okay.
Any fraud program at all relating to fraud, whether it be mortgage fraud, has to be proactive. It cannot be reactive. You cannot say, if I got a lot of fires happening on my street, okay, do we go and we have meetings talking about hiring more firemen and changing the laws so there's more ways of whatever? What do? We put in smoke detectors. We check the building code. We have inspections. Whatever. It's proactive. It's not reactive. So you can't talk about solving an issue about fraud unless, first of all, the program's proactive. So, banks and credit card companies are faced with a really unusual situation. They're trying to protect your privacy, try to protect your credit information, your money, so to speak, and do all the security measures, but at the same time make it convenient. So when you phone in in your car and you're on the cell phone with 3 kids yelling in the back, I say, look, I got this thing. I just need you to increase my limit for this or blah, 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 whatever. They can authorize you over the phone and know that it's you and resolve that issue. So it's an unusual situation to be involved in, where a bank has to try and basically perform good customer service, make it convenient for you to use the card, and at the same time protect you from fraud.
Okay, so we have all this hassle surrounding credit. Okay. Should we just go back to an all-cash society?
No.
Why not?
If anything is going to happen, look, I'm a firm believer. People have laughed at me at this, and I've been laughed at before, that the underground economy is out of control. People are working for cash, whatever. I think that in this lifetime we will see a situation where there will be no cash, there will be no credit, that there will be one number that you will have for everything. And, I'm uncomfortable telling you about my research, but some of the research that I've investigated is that they're actually talking not only about doing it for that reason with respect to fraud and impersonation, but also with respect to terrorism and that kind of stuff, that you'd have one number. And it's even gone so far that I've been doing research about possibly microchipping human beings.
Really?
In such a way that the fraud and your impersonation and your credit information, it will get so bad, the fraud will get so bad, right now it's more than the history of mankind. Fraud is the worst, and it's going to get worse, okay? That it's going to have to be a situation where they have to do away with cash because of the sophistication of photocopy machines and scanners. Pass cards are now being easily photocopied.
Creating fake documents.
Easy, okay? It's easy to manufacture anything. So I think we're going to see a situation where we'll see microchipping of human beings.
Do you think this is something that people are going to want to do?
I think people are going to line up and beg to have it done.
Really?
Okay? Because they're going to be so fed up with being at the airport and having to go through these huge, gigantic security checks because of terrorism issues and stuff like that, when you could just scan and go through. And you can research this on the internet yourself. I mean, a lot of people think it's a little far-fetched. I've been laughed at before, and I'm always right about this stuff. We're going to be we have to be in a cashless society. The second we go into a cashless society, the underground economy is cleaned up like that. Okay, there's no more working for cash. That bricklayer is working that construction site. Now there's a physical transaction of everything they do. The government would love it because now there's no cash. And I've even had smart people say to me, well, we'll just go to a barter society and everybody will just work for barter. They'll just exchange. So if I fix your car for cash, you give me a case of beer, whatever. But what people don't realize is that the government has already taxed barter. The government has already taxed barter clubs.
Okay. Before we get into that, I want to ask you now, we only have a few minutes left. Do you think that this type of crime, online crime, things like this, are really taking the place of somebody just coming and robbing you?
I think there's cowards when it comes to crime, and I think that there are people that go out and they rob. They say robbery, okay, is theft with violence. I put a gun, I use violence, the threat of violence, and I rob you. That's one form of crime. I try and manipulate you, giving your whatever. That's another form of crime. I don't think
it's going to take the place. They'll just continue.
I'm not
together.
a criminologist. I can only tell you about the things that I see in my miserable world when it comes to fraud, okay, and the kind of work that I do. So I can only tell you, I'm not a criminologist. I don't know what the stats are.
Sure.
So,
okay. Well, last question. We only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to touch on the last thing that people can do when they are stuck in this situation is litigation. Who can they contact? Should they get lawyers involved?
I would say it's only worth
suing
suing a person who has victimized you if you're convinced that person has assets. If you find the guy that's victimized you and you think that you're going to sue and get a judgment on him or her and collect, you're a gambler. You might as well go to Casino-Rama and start putting some money on the table because, you don't go into things thinking that you're going to be able to recoup your losses by suing people. Like I've written a whole article on this. It's called The Worthless Paper. There are a lot of people that have judgments on people and have restitution orders on people that they cannot collect because that person doesn't have assets. And most people who are con men and have nothing in their name. They don't have a bank account you can seize. They don't have a vehicle in their name that you can seize. They don't have anything. And it's worth litigating if you're convinced that that person's got assets and you're convinced that you're going to collect. If you can't be convinced of that, don't spend any more money. Just start cleaning up your life, start cleaning up your bureau, and just try and rebuild your credit rating.
Okay. Now, in our last couple of minutes, let's just recap. Just for the viewers at home, the last couple of shows we were talking about being aware of fraudulent consumer fraud that can be out there, especially right now. We are in loom of the Christmas season. We're going to be spending a lot more money using your debit cards, using your credit cards, using even checks. Probably not as much now, but anyway, we are buying all these things and we are at more risk as a result. So let's just recap. So with credit cards and debit cards, don't give out your information anywhere.
Right.
Don't give out your banking information. Don't give out your birth date. Don't give out
your social insurance number. Birthday, social insurance, two things go hand in hand. Just keep saying it to yourself. Never give it out.
Okay. And then online?
Online, watch out for the spoofing. Watch out for this spam stuff. And do not use the same password. If you're a member of an association and you use one password there, keep in mind that when you log into private websites that are private companies, private individuals, if you're using that same login information for your banking information, you're setting yourself up for the kill. You got to remember that. If you go into a private website that's not government, and you're logging on to do a posting in a chat group or something, and you're using that same information for your banking, you're just going to get hit. You don't know where that information is going to end up. So. Okay,
and don't respond directly to emails that you're getting to your
always
accounts, no matter even if it's from a big name company or not.
Always go to the originating site. If you see an email that looks like it's eBay and they say, John so-and-so is complaining that you didn't ship your goods, and you're going to go, I didn't do this, hang on, and you respond to it, and they're trying to get you to log in. The second you've given up that login information, you better get to your eBay account real quick because someone's going to start taking your stuff. And if you're using that same eBay account for your PayPal account, which is the service that allows you to buy on eBay, okay, then you're going to get cleaned out.
And unfortunately, it is up to us to protect ourselves. Actually, that is a good thing. We should all be in the spirit of protecting ourselves and knowing what's out there.
Proactive.
Be proactive. Unfortunately, we can try to be safe and smart against crime, but these are people that are effectively hunting us out.
Yep.
Looking out for what websites we're going on, tracking on what we're doing, trying to watch our PIN numbers. So just be careful with all your wallets and where you spend your money, and look at your statements. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks again for being here, Kevin
Bousquet.
Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank
And you are a certified fraud expert.
Examiner.
Okay. And you are the CEO of Corpa Investigations.
Correct.
You can find out more information on Kevin Bousquet's website, which is www.corpa.ca.
C-O-M.
Corpa.com, excuse me. Thank you for watching Social Impact on IDNR TV. The website's on the screen right now, so go check it out. Cool. If you have a comment or a topic idea, send us an email at info@idnrtv.com. Until then, have yourself a great night. Take care.
Good.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.